The wind howled like a dying animal across the empty alien desert. Sharp ice blew across the ground. The sky was dark, and the air was so cold it could burn skin. Jake, a human explorer, walked alone through the storm. His long coat flapped in. The wind. He held a scanner in one hand, watching the screen. He was looking for old tech, maybe something left behind after the war. Suddenly, the scanner beeped. Life sign? Jake stopped. The signal was weak. It was coming from a pile of broken metal and junk, half buried in the snow. Jake narrowed his eyes. There shouldn't be anyone out here. Not in this frozen death zone. He moved quickly. As he got closer, he saw movement. A small hand, tiny fingers. His heart jumped. He dropped to one knee and began pulling the junk away. A bent metal sheet, some old wires, a cracked fuel box. And then he saw them. Two small alien girls, curled together, shaking from the cold. One of them had her arms wrapped around the other. Their skin was pale and dirty. Their eyes wide and empty. They had no clothes, just torn cloth and scraps wrapped around their bodies. Their feet were bare and blue from frost. Jake took a step back in shock. They looked up at him like animals, scared, silent. The older one, maybe 10 years old, growled softly and pulled the younger one closer. She bared her teeth. I'm not here to hurt you, Jake said gently. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands. It's okay. I'm a friend. No answer. Jake looked around. The storm was getting worse. Soon, this place would be a frozen grave if he left them. They wouldn't last another hour. I have food. I have heat. You need help, he said. Still no reply. Jake took off his coat and wrapped it around the younger girl. She flinched but didn't stop him. Then he lifted her into his arms. She was so light, too light. Like she hadn't eaten in days. The older girl growled again, ready to bite. Jake knelt and whispered, both of you, come home. The girl froze, her lips trembled. For a second, something in her eyes changed. Fear turned into confusion. No one had ever said that to her before, not like that. Not with kindness. Jake stretched out his other arm. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, she crawled into his embrace. Together, he carried them back to his rover. The cold bit into his skin, but he didn't stop. Inside the warm vehicle, he wrapped them in blankets and gave them a heated drink. They didn't speak. They didn't blink. They just watched him with tired, broken eyes. He tried asking their names. No answer. He scanned them. No ID chips, no records. Like they didn't exist. Jake looked at the two girls huddled together on the seat. Where did you come from? He whispered. Who left you out there? The older one opened her mouth. Her voice was dry, cracked. We ran, she said softly. They were going to burn us. Jake's chest tightened. He didn't ask more questions. Not yet. He drove them back to his base, an old outpost hidden in the cliffs. As the rover rolled through the snow, Jake glanced back. The younger girl had fallen asleep against her sister. The older one kept her eyes open, watching him, still unsure if he could be trusted. But as they reached the base and Jake carried them inside, something happened. The older girl whispered, almost too quiet to hear, You're not like the others. Jake paused in the doorway. He looked at her. Her lips were shaking, but her voice was clear. You didn't look at us like trash, she said. Jake swallowed hard. No, he replied. Because you're not. He set them down on a soft bed inside. Gave them warm soup. Brought clean clothes. They didn't touch any of it at first. They sat still, waiting, as if they thought someone would come in and hurt them. But no one came, just Jake. Just his soft voice. Just his quiet care. That night, as the storm screamed outside, the younger girl finally fell into deep sleep, safe and warm. The older one stayed awake, her hand holding tightly onto Jake's coat. She had no name. No home. No hope. Tonight, for the first time, she felt something new. Maybe, just maybe, She had been found. Asterisk, the first thing they did was crawl under the table. Not on it. Under it. Jake watched from across the room, confused. He had just given them clean clothes, soft towels, and a warm room with fresh lights. But instead of using the bed he had carefully prepared, the two alien girls had curled up on the cold floor, hiding beneath the metal table like scared animals. They didn't say a word. They held each other tightly, eyes wide, waiting for something. Jake knelt beside them, his voice calm. "It's okay. You don't have to hide here." The older girl shook her head fast. "It's safer down here. Beds are for them." Jake didn't understand. "Who?" She didn't answer. But the fear in her eyes spoke louder than words. He looked back at the soft bed in the corner of the room. It was covered in clean blankets and had a small stuffed alien doll resting on the pillow, one of the few toys he had found during his travels. He thought it would bring them comfort, but now he realized something shocking. They didn't even know what comfort was. Jake didn't push them. He just placed 2 bowls of soup on the floor near the table. Warm, thick, and full of flavor. The smell filled the room, but the girls didn't eat right away. The younger one looked up at her sister as if asking permission. The older one sniffed the soup. Then she carefully dipped one finger into it and licked it. Her eyes went wide. She whispered, "It's not poison." Only then did they eat. Fast. Desperate. Like animals who didn't know when their next meal would come. Jake looked away, his heart breaking. What kind of monsters had these girls escaped from? Later, when they had finished eating, the younger girl crept out from under the table. She wandered over to the soft bed, curious. She touched the blanket with the tip of her finger, then jumped back, startled. Jake chuckled gently. "It's just soft, not dangerous." She touched it again, then smiled. "Just a little." The older girl watched from the table. "Why is it soft?" she asked suspiciously. Jake walked over and sat on the floor, so he was at their eye level. "Because it's meant for rest, for sleep, for safety." She didn't move. "We slept on metal before, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, but never soft." Jake looked into her eyes and said simply, "You're not there anymore." Hours passed. Jake showed them how to use the warm water tap. The girls stared at it like it was magic. When he turned it on and water came out, they gasped. The younger one laughed and clapped her hands. Jake smiled for the first time in days. He gave them clean towels, soft clothes, and a little bar of scented soap. They sniffed everything like curious animals. Slowly, carefully, they began to wash their hands and faces. The dirt peeled away, revealing pale skin beneath. They were just kids. Just children, but someone had treated them like tools, like slaves, like trash. Jake's jaw clenched. That night, he left the room with a small heater running and a calm light glowing in the corner. He didn't lock the door. He didn't watch them. He just said, "You're safe now, sleep well." When he came back an hour later to check on them, the bed was still untouched, but they were sleeping. Not under the table, not on the cold floor. They had crawled beside the bed and were lying on the blanket, still dressed, still alert, but slowly breathing like they were finally relaxing. Younger one had her arms around the stuffed alien doll. The older one was curled around her protectively. Jake whispered to himself, "We've got a long road ahead." He closed the door quietly behind him. And for the first time since they arrived, the room was silent, not from fear, but from peace. Jake wasn't trying to see their scars. He only wanted to check if the girls were healing. But when the older one lifted her arm to reach for a spoon, her sleeve slipped down just a little. That's when he saw it. A long, deep burn mark across her wrist. Old, but angry looking. Like it had never been treated properly. Jake froze. Not out of fear, but out of shock. Then he saw another mark, peeking out from under her collar. Thin, sharp. Like someone had wrapped a wire around her neck tight. She noticed his eyes and pulled her sleeve down quickly. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was cold now, defensive. Jake didn't push. "Okay." But that night, while the girls were asleep, Jake sat at his workbench, staring at the scan data he had taken earlier. He had lied to them. The scans weren't just for temperature or health. They had revealed something deeper. Their bodies were full of damage, not just bruises or burns. No. Tiny implants in the neck, metal nodes under the skin, and strange patterns along the spine, like someone had tried to control them. Jake leaned back in his chair, fists clenched. What the hell were these girls used for? The next morning, he brought them simple breakfast bread, fruit, and hot milk. The younger one smiled and thanked him softly. The older one stayed quiet. He tried a gentle question. "Do your backs hurt?" She stopped chewing. Then nodded slowly. "Do you know what's inside you?" he asked. She blinked. Her voice was so soft, it almost disappeared. "They put things in us to make us obey." Jake sat down across from her, his eyes calm. "Do you want it out?" The girl looked confused. "You can do that?" "I can try." In the small medroom of the base, Jake used his old repair tools machines, once meant to fix drones and bots. He had never used them on living beings, but the implants were not deeply rooted. Whoever placed them wanted control, not healing. The younger girl watched from the doorway, hugging her stuffed doll. The older girl sat on the table, shaking. Jake looked her in the eye. "If it hurts too much, I'll stop, I promise." She nodded. The machine beeped. Jake worked carefully, slowly removing the tiny pieces from her back and neck, one by one. The moment the last piece came out, the scanner flashed green. No more control signals. It was done. But then, the girl did something Jake didn't expect. She cried, not loud, not wild, just soft tears rolling down her cheeks. "I thought I'd die with those inside me," she whispered. "You took them out." Jake gently placed a warm cloth on her shoulder. "You're free now." She looked at him, really looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" Jake didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because someone should have, a long time ago." That night, the girls didn't hide under the table. They sat on the bed, side by side, watching Jake cook. They asked questions. Simple ones. "What's that smell? What's this tool? Do humans dream?" Jake answered each one with a soft smile. Later, as the room grew quiet, the older girl spoke again. "They gave us numbers. I was 46. She was 47. Jake shook his head. "That's not a name." "We never had names." Jake looked at them for a long time, then said, "You'll get new ones, ones you choose." The girls blinked in surprise. "We can choose?" The younger one asked. "Yes," Jake said. "This time, it's your choice." They had no names. But now, they had a future, and the truth, the pain, the wires, the scars, they were no longer secrets hidden under their skin. Now they were part of a story being rewritten, a story where the ending might just be warm instead of cold. The moment the wind changed, the older girl froze. She was helping Jake wash fruit in a bucket when her nose twitched like a wild animal catching a scent. Her eyes widened. Her hand dropped the fruit. Jake noticed instantly. "What is it?" She didn't answer. She just grabbed her sister's hand and ran inside the base without saying a word. Jake followed quickly. Heart pounding. Inside, he found them both hiding under the bed again, eyes wide, breathing fast. He knelt down beside them. "What's going on?" The older girl's voice trembled. "They're close." Jake blinked. "Who?" She whispered like she was speaking a curse. "The ones who owned us." Jake didn't waste time. He checked the radar screen. A ship was approaching low, fast, unmarked. Too small for transport. Too clean for traders. Too silent for friends. Jake tightened his jaw. "Stay inside. Don't come out no matter what." The older girl grabbed his hand. "Please, They don't ask questions. If they find us, they will. Jake placed a hand over hers. They won't. Then he grabbed his rifle, activated the defense scanners, and stepped outside. The alien ship landed slowly in the snow, about 50 meters from the base. Jake stood there, tall and alone, waiting. The ramp opened. 3 figures stepped out, 2 in armor and 1 in a smooth black coat. The man in black smiled coldly. "Human," he said. "We're just passing by, looking for something that was stolen." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Lost, you mean?" The man chuckled. "Call it what you want." 2 test units disappeared from our labs. We tracked their signal here. Have you seen anything strange? Jake didn't blink. No, just snow and silence. The man's smile faded slightly. Mind if we look around? Jake didn't move. I do. Inside the base, the girls were hiding in the crawl space beneath the floor. The younger one whispered, "Will he send us back?" The older one shook her head. "He said we're home. He won't give us up." Still, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Back outside, the tension grew. One of the soldiers took a step forward. "We have orders." Jake raised his weapon slightly. "So do I." The man in black's eyes narrowed. "Is this really worth dying for, human?" Jake didn't look away. "You don't scare me, but I know you scare them." That's when something changed. The air felt colder. The man in black stepped back and gave a nod. "Fine, we'll leave." But as they walked toward their ship, he turned his head slightly and whispered, "This isn't over." As soon as the ship vanished into the sky, Jake locked down the base. Inside, the girls came out slowly. The younger one ran to Jake and hugged his leg. The older girl looked up at him. "They'll come back," she said. Jake nodded. "The next time we'll be ready." She stared at him. "Why? Why do you keep protecting us?" Jake took a breath, then answered softly, "Because someone tried to throw you away like trash, but I see treasure." That night, Jake opened a crate in the storage room. Inside were old weapons, shields, codes, and gear from his soldier days. He hadn't touched them in years, but now, he wasn't just protecting his home anymore. He was defending his family. The sound came at midnight. A soft click. Then silence. Jake's eyes snapped open. He had trained for years as a soldier. He knew the sound of a security system being hacked. He grabbed his weapon and rushed to the main hallway. The lights flickered. The front lock had been bypassed. They were inside. The girls were asleep until the older one woke with a feeling in her chest, like ice creeping into her heart. She shook her little sister gently. "They're here." Both girls jumped out of bed and crawled into the hidden hatch beneath the floor, just like Jake had taught them. The older girl pulled the latch shut and pressed her body over her sister, whispering, "Don't make a sound." Footsteps echoed through the base. Jake stepped into the hall, rifle raised. "You picked the wrong night." 3 armed men moved through the shadows, scanning the room. One of them called out, "We know you're hiding them, human. You're not authorized to keep project property." Jake shouted back, "They're not property, they're children." "You were warned," the voice hissed. The fight began. Laser bursts lit the hallway. Jake ducked behind cover and fired back, moving like a ghost through his own home. He'd set traps earlier, flash bombs, smoke walls, collapsing doors. He knew every inch of this base, but they were trained too, and they were getting closer to the girl's hiding spot. Under the floor, the younger girl whimpered. "I'm scared." The older girl held her tighter. "He said we're not going back. He promised." Above them, footsteps approached. A heavy thud. Someone standing right over the hatch. Jake tackled the last attacker before he could lift the hatch panel. They fought hand to hand, rolling across the floor. Jake's weapon was gone, but he didn't stop. Every punch, every movement, was fueled by something more than survival. It was love. It was rage. The soldier reached for a knife. Jake grabbed a wrench, and brought it down hard. Silence. When the fight was over, Jake stood, bleeding and breathing hard. The lights flickered back on. Slowly, the hatch opened. The girls looked up at him. "You came," the older one whispered. "Always," Jake said, pulling them into his arms. Later, as dawn rose over the snowy cliffs, Jake sat with the girls beside the fire. He held out 2 warm cups and said, "This is your home, and I'll fight for it." Again and again. The older girl looked into the flames. She was no longer shaking. She was remembering something. Something she had long forgotten. Hope. The video began with silence. Then a little girl's scream, followed by flashing lights, gunshots, and a man's voice shouting, "You're not taking them." The footage came from Jake's hidden cameras, and now it was on every screen across the system. News networks picked it up first. Human soldier defends abused alien children from corporate hunters. Are they slaves or survivors? 2 little girls, 1 hero. The footage went viral. Millions watched as Jake stood between the attackers and the girls, wounded but unbroken, shouting that they were not property, they were his family. Inside the base, Jake turned off the screen. The girl sat quietly beside him, not fully understanding why people were suddenly talking about them. The older one looked up. "Are we in trouble?" Jake shook his head. "No, they are." He pointed to the sky. Everyone out there saw what they did. They can't hide anymore. But truth has 2 faces. For every kind message, there came a warning. Powerful voices wanted the girls silenced. A cold message arrived from a private channel. "Return the units before we make an example of you." Jake didn't reply. He looked at the girls and said, "They can come for me, but not for you." That day, Jake went to the Planetary Council, not to beg. To fight. He stood in front of leaders from 12 systems, holding a small data drive in his hand, the evidence of what those girls had suffered. He spoke calmly, but with fire in his heart. They had no name, no freedom, no love. But I gave them something no one else would, a chance. Some council members rolled their eyes. Others leaned forward. But one, an old alien diplomat, stood and said softly, "What will you do if we tell you to hand them over?" Jake answered, "I won't, even if it costs me everything." Back at the base, the girls were watching the door. They didn't play. They didn't laugh. They just waited. Until they heard footsteps and a knock. It was Jake. He stepped in slowly and gave them the news. "No one can take you away. Not anymore." The younger girl burst into tears and hugged him tight. The older one stared at him in disbelief. "You did it?" she whispered. "They believed you?" Jake smiled. "They believed us." That night, for the first time ever, the girls chose names. The younger one said, "I want to be called Luma, because you gave me light." The older one thought for a long time, then said, "Aaron, it sounds strong." Jake nodded. "Then Luma. And Aaron it is." He knelt before them and held their hands. "No more hiding, no more numbers. You're free." The girls didn't answer. They didn't need to. They just smiled. And that smile was louder than any scream. The first time Aaron called him Dad, it wasn't planned. It just happened. She had dropped a glass by accident. It shattered on the floor. She froze, expecting to be hit, yelled at, punished. But Jake only smiled gently and said, "It's okay, we'll clean it up together." She stared at him, confused, then whispered without thinking, "Okay, Dad." Silence filled the room. Even Luma's eyes went wide. Jake paused, surprised, but then he walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I like the sound of that," he said softly. And that's when Aaron smiled. The kind of smile that had never existed on her face before. Weeks passed. The snow melted. Spring came to the wasteland planet, bringing fresh light and green patches across the rocky hills. Jake built a small garden with Aaron. Luma helped feed the local birds with crumbs of old bread. Laughter became normal. So did stories before bedtime. So did hugs. So did peace. One day, a large ship arrived, but this time, it carried no soldiers, only a representative from the Galactic Child Protection Unit. She came to see if Jake's guardianship was legal. She expected trouble, but what she saw made her eyes tear up. Two girls, clean, happy, healthy, ran to Jake and held his hands like they never wanted to let go. The woman smiled. There's nothing else I need to see. Back at the council chambers, Jake stood again, this time not in defense, but in pride. I didn't rescue two broken girls, he said. I gained two daughters. No one could argue, because across the galaxy, everyone had seen the change. Not just in Aaron and Luma, but in what it meant to be human. Months later, the base looked nothing like it did before. Walls were painted. Flowers grew near the entrance. A swing hung from the metal bar outside. Luma's drawings filled the hallway. Aaron had her own tools, now small, but sharp. She wanted to be a mechanic like Jake. Jake? He slept lighter now. Not because he was afraid, but because every day felt like a blessing he didn't want to miss. One night, as stars filled the sky, Luma looked up at Jake. Do you think they'll come again? The bad people? Jake looked at the stars then. Down at his daughters. Maybe. But this time, they won't be facing one man. He pulled them both close. They'll be facing a family. And so the story that began with cold, fear, and silence ended with warmth, love, and two girls who no longer shook when someone knocked on the door. They weren't numbers anymore. They weren't projects. They were Luma and Aaron. And Jake was more than a soldier. He was a father, a protector, a reason they could finally dream without fear.